Okay, so this video is actually going to be a repost, but I'm doing this intro because I want you to look back 4 years ago and I want you to see how enthusiastic and how excited I was to see a new Chrysler product. And then I want you to compare how I was 4 years ago to what I am now. So they're saying over at Chrysler that in a couple of days, on the 13th of September, that they are going to have a front row seat for the reveal of one of the most powerful and luxurious special edition vehicles in Chrysler brand history. We'll also share details on how you can reserve a vehicle of your own from this limited production run. Now, they're saying vehicle availability is beginning in spring 2023, and they're saying visit your Dodge dealer for vehicle availability. Now, what they basically show is they show this picture of a wheel and they show a red Brembo caliper. So obviously that is some type of SRT performance product because for the most part, that's all their manufacturing chain basically supports at this point. Whenever you see red Brembo brakes, either you're talking about a 392 Hemi is in this car, or the possibility of there being finally, after all these years, a 300 Hellcat. When I bought my Chrysler 300 in 2006, my first SRT8, I loved the car. I was really happy to have the car, and I loved the way the car looked. I liked everything about it. As time went on, I saw that that car got aggressively more expensive to fix, and parts started getting more problematic. With the 2012 that I traded the 2006 in for, the 2012 was a perfect car. It had everything. I really loved it. It was a great looking car. It had every feature: panoramic sunroof. It had a panoramic moonroof, because it opens up. Heated, cooled seats, heated, cooled cup holders, Uconnect 8. It had everything. But then I had a lot of problems with that car. And I also had a lot of issues with that car having to go back to the shop. Not only that, I was going through tires like every 5,000 miles. So the issue ultimately became, it's like I wanted something new. What you wouldn't know until right now, because I'm so good at keeping a secret, is that my Chrysler 300 SRT was ruined, for me anyway, when it was hit in the side. I was driving down a street and there was some asshole in a Nissan Maxima. And this fucking idiot blew a stop sign and he T-boned my car. So as you can see, this is my 300 when it got T-boned. That's the picture. I took very few pictures of it when that happened, but that's the picture. It took Geico about possibly 2 weeks to order a brand new driver's side door. And if I'm not mistaken, they replaced both of I know they replaced the driver's side door, but I think they actually undented the passenger door. So after 2 weeks, I had the car back in my hands. But it just didn't feel right to me. After one of these SRT products gets hit and damaged in this manner, these cars don't ever drive and feel the same way again. That's one of the problems when you're dealing with these performance cars, the balancing and the handling. If these things ever go out of whack, the car just doesn't feel right. So what I did was I had Geico through its, what is it called? The insurance. I had them fix the car up. I only paid for the deductible. They fixed the car, and the car was basically looking like new. Unfortunately, it never felt right. For example, when I'd get into it, the passenger seat, I would get in on the driver's side, and while I'm driving it, I would hear creaks in the frame and I would hear creaks in the passenger seat. Despite the fact that the car was not totaled out, I guess they felt that it didn't have to. I just didn't ever feel right about that car anymore. So what I ended up doing was I took that car and I traded it in for the Dodge Charger Hellcat. I made a video, so the video is still on YouTube because I usually don't delete any videos. I took that car in and I went to the Manhattan Dodge dealership, Dodge Jeep Chrysler on Manhattan. And in the video, you can clearly see that I was looking at the red Dodge Charger Hellcat. And When I was looking at it, salesman comes up, salesman starts talking to me. Oh yeah, you like this car? I was like, yeah, I like this car, but I heard you people are trying to mark up on these cars because I had a friend who bought a Challenger Hellcat, and at that time they were demanding like $5,000 and sometimes $10,000 more, especially for the manuals at that time because the problem is Chrysler, and I guess they have a long history of this, but Chrysler, they will put out some pretty cool and interesting technology. And they've done this because even when you go to the car shows, you can see it and you can hear people tell you the stories about what they have gone through dealing with Chrysler and Mopar. But the issue is the manual never should have been in that Hellcat. The 6-speed manual was way too underpowered for that engine. Now, the Hellcat engine, when you use the manual, the 6-speed manual, it would either cause the gears to stick or between that first and third gear, that Hellcat Challenger was stripping those gears. So people who had Hellcat Challengers with 6-speed manuals, a lot of them had to take those cars back to the dealership and those cars sat in the dealership having their transmissions repaired. The Charger, what they were smart to do was they made the Charger automatic only. The 8-speed manual transmission in that car is able to handle all of that power just perfectly. Not only is it able to handle the 392, but it's also able to handle the Hellcat, and it's also able to handle the Red Eye and the Demon engines. The problem, again, is that these cars put out so much power until basically the car is anxious to get to the 8th gear. Once it gets to the 8th gear, it doesn't have as much stress on the other gears. But when you're in that first, second, and third gear, this car puts a lot of torque on those gears. And we know that these cars have over 600 pound-feet of torque, but it's delivered so early on in the rev range that what ends up happening is the first, second, and third gear get all the stress. But once you start getting up to like the 6th, 7th, and 8th gear, the car gets even smoother and smoother and smoother, and it gets faster and faster and faster, and it even gets better fuel economy. The Hellcat wasn't enough for me. So what I did was I took that Hellcat and I went up to another dealer. I was looking around to see if anybody could help me replace my Jeep SRT lease. So what I ended up finding, and there was a dude who worked there, a really cool guy, he found a silver Jeep that was fully loaded, because for the most part, the Jeep Grand Cherokees came in fully loaded. Moonroof, leather, Laguna leather seats, navigation system, and so forth and so on, heated and cooled seats. And he got me that Jeep, and that was February 2016. It was brand new, no miles on it except delivery. And as soon as I saw that truck, I fell in love with it because if you remember back then, the Jeep Grand Cherokee was big news. Everybody wanted the Jeep Grand Cherokee specifically because it was all-wheel drive. It was big and it was good looking, so you could get your whole family in there, which is one of the problems with the practicality of the Charger and the Challenger. If you have children and they've got child seats or booster seats, space starts to be an issue. Now, even though you can fit adults in the back seat, the issue ultimately becomes that when you have children, space absolutely starts to become an issue. The other problem is those cars are not that great during the winter. And if you have harsh winters, like if you live in a place like Canada or where these things are made anyway, winters can be extremely harsh on these cars. When I had that Chrysler 300 SRT, and that was just the 392, the 2012, I was going through tires like every 4,000 or 5,000 miles, and that's no joke. With the Jeep SRT, one of the things I noticed right up until Biden got into the White House and gas prices went crazy, one of the things that I noticed with the Jeep SRT is I was actually saving money. For one thing, I wasn't having as much problem with the car getting damaged because it wasn't low to the ground. It had plenty of ground clearance. The second thing I noticed was I wasn't going through tires as much. I was able to easily get 2 years for a set of tires. Even right now, my Jeep SRT is still in the fucking shop, which is something I want to talk about. And I have a big apocalypse driving video coming that I haven't put out yet. But the issue is the Jeep SRT, up until recently, was actually saving me money because the only thing I really had to do was oil changes, fluid checks and fluid changes, and tire replacements every 2 years. For some people, that sounds like a lot. They can get way more years out of their tires. The problem is the Jeep SRT, in order to, make sure that it doesn't tip over with its suspension, the camber on those tires, I believe, is high positive. So there's actually tilting in the way that those wheels are on there. And that helps it to be stable around sharp turns. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I was able to afford the tires every 2 years. It's not a big deal. You figure it's like $700 or $800 every 2 years. That's not a big deal for me. That's nothing. I can make that in YouTube. That's half of my YouTube check or somewhere close to it every single month. So that's not a big deal. The issue I really had was past 60,000 miles, everything started going wrong. Thermostat needed replacement. AC condenser needed replacement. The compressor needed replacement. The radiator had a crack, needed replacement. The radiator hose needed replacement because the person who went in there to install the radiator didn't do a great job, and the hose started rubbing up against the serpentine belt. Serpentine belt cut a fucking hole in the hose, so then I had to take it back again, pay $200 to Mavis. Mavis fixed it, and they put a guard protector around it. But the air conditioning unit conked out, which is why I made that video showing you how to replace the fuses in the air conditioner. After that, around 70,000 miles, I should also say that in between that 60 and 70,000 miles, I started having problems with my all-wheel drive system. I started getting a rubbing in the gears. I've also noticed that other people who are up in the mileage between 50 and 60,000 started to get rubbing in the gears. And it turns out that these Jeeps, just like the old model, the WK1, these Jeeps have a problem with all-wheel drive transmission of energy. So my rear differential needed to be replaced. My all-wheel drive transfer case needed to be checked. And at the end of all of it, my warranty covered it. But one thing I noticed is certain dealers, if you don't buy the cars from them, they don't give a fuck about you. Problem is, what happens if a part breaks and the closest dealer you can get it to isn't the dealer you bought from? Well, now you're in a pickle because when you have to rent a car, God knows how long the parts are going to take to come in. And if you don't know how long the parts are going to take to come in, you could be in a situation where you're without a car for a very long period of time. I am going to cover all this in my Apocalypse Driving video, so I'm not going to get into this right now. But the bottom line is, today is September 7th, 2022. My Jeep Grand Cherokee has been in the shop since August 1st of, obviously, August 1st of this year. And only recently did I bother to rent that Hyundai Sonata because you can't drive nice cars in and out of the city. Either they're going to get sideswiped or you're going to get damage to them. I absolutely am intending that at the end of this year, I'm getting a new car.
I'm going to show you something really, really beautiful. Excuse me, please. Come on, out of the way. Right. It's that. A 6.2 litre V8 with 700 horsepower, the Grand Cherokee Tracker. This is the world's most powerful SUV.
As I've said numerous times, I never wanted a Dodge car. I did not want the Dodge Charger, and I did not want the Dodge Challenger. I realized early on that the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger were cheap versions of the Chrysler 300. So what Chrysler did was, as a company, FCA, they started to devalue the Chrysler 300, and then they made the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger more sought after, despite the fact that those are cheap cars. Those cars don't come with anything near what the Chrysler 300 interior came with. Panoramic roof, heated cooled cup holders, better materials. But the reality is, I was getting so much more in the Jeep Grand Cherokee that, to tell you the truth, I stopped caring about the Chrysler 300 simply because the Chrysler 300 was rear-wheel drive and the Jeep Grand Cherokee was all-wheel drive. And in that time frame between 2008 and the next couple of years, more people, after the auto bailout era, people started shifting towards crossovers and SUVs. As far as I was concerned, I had the best-looking SUV on the market. And even the BMWs and the Mercedes, those were just Me Too cars. that for the most part weren't as powerful until they started twin turboing all their engines. And then even at that point, with the Hellcat engine, they would have still been more powerful than everything else, as you've seen, because the Trackhawk beats the Urus easily. And I've posted videos of that. So the Urus is basically a badge whore car for people who need to drive something that says Lamborghini, despite the fact it's a guzzied up Audi. The Trackhawk is faster than the Bentiaga. The Trackhawk is faster than the Cullinan. I thought that they were going to do it right. They didn't do it right. And they never even came back and said, yeah, we fucked this car up on purpose. What they did was they released the Dodge Durango Hellcat. And the Dodge Durango Hellcat came exactly the way the Trackhawk should have. So I think at that point, my attitude towards Mopar and Chrysler had been completely soured. No Chrysler 300 Hellcat, a Trackhawk that looked unappealing and boring. And I think at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm done. So guess where I'm going? As you already know, I'm moving on to Cadillac. I have my Cadillac Lyriq on pre-order. It's going to have a white interior, pretty much spec just like this. Silver exterior, white interior, or yellow, gray, whatever. I mean, gray interior. And that's what I'm getting. I've been through fuel crises. I've been through issues where you couldn't even get gas because like Hurricane Sandy made it so you couldn't get gas. Electricity I've never had a problem with. That's going to be my next car, and I'm waiting to get it. Originally, I was waiting to see what Dodge and Chrysler would come up with. But as we know, that showing of the Banshee was completely laughable and for the most part just ridiculous. In my opinion, it basically showed that Dodge and Chrysler Stellantis, it just showed me that they're further behind the ball than I thought that they actually were. I thought they were going to come up with some interesting products. But the other issue that's making me leave Dodge, and this is the last one I'm going to mention, is the theft. I live in New York City. As you can see here, theft for these cars has been out of control, absolutely out of control. We've seen general raises in crime, but the theft for these cars in particular, because you've got these losers who can't afford them, will never be able to afford them. So what they've decided to do is steal them instead. They steal them, they go on joyrides, they steal them, they strip them, they sell them for parts. I refuse to ever wake up and find that my car has been stripped. I refuse to ever walk out of my office and find out that my car has ever been stripped or the wheels have been taken off my car. That I've been fortunate. That's never happened to me. Now, in the past, I have lost some parts off of my cars, but I've never lost things that were that expensive to replace. The theft and the fuckboyism is the reason I'm leaving. These cars have brought out the absolute worst in people. They've brought out the worst in the car culture, and it's nothing but a bunch of fuckboys now. I'm ready to move on. Let them play with that game. I'm done. I'm Vin Diesel. What happened to the brotherhood of muscle? What happened to the days when you had a good, powerful V8 and it had a supercharger on it? Now the brotherhood of muscle is going towards electric, and I'm very upset about that. So here in Fast and Furious 10, this will be probably the last movie we'll be legally able to have gas-powered cars. The brotherhood of muscle is now on its way out. Whenever there is new news that has to be related to Mopar or the Hemi or any of the car models that you see coming out of FCA, somebody usually sends me a text message or a Facebook message and lets me know that something has just happened and it should deserve my attention. So basically, you may have heard, you may have not heard, the Chrysler 300 is slated to get the Hellcat engine. Now, is this official? Well, we're hearing it on multiple sources. So the problem is we absolutely don't know if it's official. But it makes sense that the Chrysler 300 should get the Hellcat engine simply because the Chrysler 300 is essentially the exact same car as the Dodge Charger. If you have been a regular viewer of my channel, you would know that I purchased a Dodge Charger Hellcat, and to tell you the God's honest truth, I was not happy with it. I outlined the reasons why I was not happy with it. Some people like to attack you when you complain, but since it's my money, you ain't got nothing to say anyway. I wasn't happy with the Dodge Charger Hellcat for one reason, because the interiors are cheaper on the Dodge products. If you compare the Dodge Durango SRT to the Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT, you will see that the Jeep has a slightly higher build quality. The same goes when you compare the Charger to the Chrysler 300. Now, the only interior issue I ever had with the Chrysler 300 was every now and then the applique stickers that they had on there for individual models. Sometimes those would, the glue would start to come off, and the whatever was holding them on, the 3M adhesive, would start to come off. It's something that I felt shouldn't be in a car that's this expensive, and it seems like they've been trying to cut back on it. As you know, this is my Chrysler 300 SRT. It was a 2012 model. If you look at my videos and you look carefully, you'll actually see that I made a purchase video of the day that I went and bought it. And I got it brand new. I think it had like 30 miles on it or something. It was like test miles or something. But I got it from out in Roslyn. And I was one of the few people who actually had this car. And the problem that I did kind of have was the fact that with the exception of the larger rims and the blacked out features and the tail spoiler, nobody else had a Chrysler 300 that looked exactly like this. In all of the time that I had this car, there were very, very few people who had this car. Like, I may have seen maybe 3 or 4 white ones. I may have seen maybe 2 or 3 red ones. And I'm pretty sure I saw less than 5 black ones. And it took years for people to actually buy them because they bought them as they depreciated, like, year over year. And then they started bringing them to the car shows. But I pretty much loved this car. It was my favorite cruiser. It was my favorite, go to Manhattan and drive around car. One of the problems, if you drive a Mercedes S-Class here in New York City, because we have an S-Class on lease that we use for car service business, one of the problems is that people mistake you for a limo driver. I'm not a limo driver. I don't drive as a car service. I like to have vehicles that absolutely look nothing like anything anybody would ever mistake me for being a limo driver. The problem is, lately, with Uber having taken over the majority of the city, and now there's so many people doing Uber duties, the problem is that this car is now so common that people look at it and they think it's a limo. It's still a great-looking car, but usually cars like this that have this design, they are usually left to limo drivers, cab services or car services, and elderly people. I like the gentlemanly look of the car. It looks elegant. It looks fantastic. But the only problem is, over time, I kind of fell out of love with it because the back seat wasn't very spacious. Other than that, I really had no problems with it. The engine ran perfectly. It was a Hemi V8. Other than that, the only other thing that I would say is kind of an issue is the fact that because I drive kind of heavy-footed, I kept burning through rear tires. Rear tires on my Chrysler 300 never lasted longer than about 4,000 or 5,000 miles. My Jeep SRT's tires, however, because it's all-wheel drive, it doesn't do burnouts, those tires have lasted about 20,000 miles before being in need of change. And over that time period, you can get cheaper tires, but if you choose to go OEM and get the Pirelli Scorpion Verdes, it's going to cost you close to $2,000 for a full set of tires, mounting, and wheel balancing and all that. Had the Chrysler 300 SRT been available with the Hellcat engine, I never would have purchased the Dodge Charger. Once again, the interior is cheaper. It didn't offer the panoramic moonroof, and there were features that I felt that the Charger should have had that it did not have. One of which was the adaptive cruise control system that even my Chrysler 300 SRT had. And on top of that were other features that my Chrysler 300 SRT had, such as a heated and cooled cup holders. And, you know, basically it was a luxury car. If you're paying $70,000 for a car, I expect to get things like I outlined in my Dodge Charger Hellcat purchase video. It is because of those things that I mentioned that I really feel that the absolute best Hellcat product that is powered by a Hellcat engine is really the Jeep Trackhawk. Now, I already outlined what I'm upset about with the Jeep Trackhawk. They didn't give it Hellcat badges. They didn't give it a Hellcat hood, which those are some things that you might be able to mod yourself, but I shouldn't have to mod those myself, especially when you want $100,000 for a Jeep. And let me also say this, because I had refrained from saying it a while back, and I should have said it a long time ago. There is absolutely no way that I would pay an overcharge on any of these cars. As you know, when I made my Charger Hellcat purchase video, I told them up front, I'm not paying over. They, in where I live, New York City, they're trying to get $5,000, $10,000, and even $30,000 over if they can trick people into it. They're trying to get top dollar overcharge for a Jeep Trackhawk. I refuse to pay overcharge. So if and when I purchase one, I absolutely will not pay a dime over sticker. Absolutely not. I know it's supposed to cost $100,000, but I would never pay over. One of the reasons is because of the depreciation. These cars depreciate quick. I wanted to believe that the Hellcats wouldn't depreciate, but the problem is they're made in relatively unlimited numbers, and there's no limit placed on them right now. So therefore, the depreciation that you get hit with is about $20,000 after fewer than 5,000 miles. So your pay-in price of $70,000 drops dramatically to the 50s, and then it hovers in the 50s because that's where the Charger Scat and the Charger SRT are. Now, those depreciate about $10,000 to the 40s, but they really don't drop much lower than that, not in the short term, especially while they're still under warranty. The Hellcats lose $20,000 after just 5,000 miles. The Jeep SRT, in my opinion, is really FCA's best, most sensible product. It makes the most sense. It's an all-wheel drive Hemi that's pretty damn fast. Thus far, I've seen plenty of videos of the Trackhawk, and to tell you the God's honest truth, I have not been impressed. The supercharger whine is lower. On top of that, it looks exactly like all of the rest of the Jeep products. It looks, in fact, I'll say it like this, it doesn't even look exactly like all the regular Jeep SRTs. It looks just like every single other Jeep, the same color as it. If you were sitting at a stoplight, the only way somebody would recognize that that wasn't a regular Overland Summit or a regular SRT, the only way they would know is the fact that it has yellow brakes. But I've seen yellow brakes painted onto regular Trailhawk and Overland Summits. I've seen this. There are people who've already painted their brake calipers yellow, especially if they have a red paint body Jeep. So in my opinion, they didn't do enough with the Trackhawk to differentiate it, and it's very simple what they needed to do. They need to put the Hellcat hood, the Hellcat badges, and possibly even large designed Hellcat wheels. But the people at FCA aren't paying attention, and they're not taking the most important features of these vehicles and accentuating them. And that, I believe, they deserve criticism for. This picture right here is what the Jeep Trackhawk should look like. There is no reason for it not to look like this. This is what it is supposed to look like. It's called logical progression. We saw that a Hellcat had badges added onto it to tell you that the engine was the Hellcat 6.2 supercharged. And then we saw that the Hellcat has a hood scoop intake in order to suck in air. This way, you don't necessarily need to get rid of the distinctive fog lights that let you know that this is still a Jeep SRT level product. So while I can understand that they want to debadge SRT off of it, anybody can add SRT badges. What's too expensive and not worth doing is having to change your hood, paint your hood, and have to add on stuff that should have came with it in the first place. Even these wheels designed here are the exact same wheels that I got on my Charger Hellcat, except they're bigger. Now, I've been on Jeep forums and I've had arguments with assholes and morons and dumbasses, some of which who still are riding around in the original Jeep SRT because their payments per month, they just don't have the money to get the brand newest. There are some people who have claimed that they're going to get the Trackhawk, but I think that once they try to get a value on their used Jeeps, I think once they see how much depreciation difference they're paying for, once they see that, I think they'll understand relatively quickly that having to spend $1,400 per month for the Jeep Trackhawk absolutely makes no sense, especially when the Jeep Trackhawk has only been shown to give you about 1 second better in the quarter mile and about 1 second better from a 0 to 60. 1 second may be a lot when you're racing somebody in a quarter mile, but the sad truth is the vast majority of people who buy these things are not racing them. They're driving them fast, but thus far I have not seen enough from the Jeep Trackhawk to actually justify a $100,000 price. Even though they say it's only $86,000, the simple math of the situation says that you're not gonna buy this thing unless it's at least optioned out the way your Jeep SRTs are optioned out. The panoramic roof, the premium sound system, both of those are $2,000 options. I'm not even considering adding the red leather because I don't like red leather. I like black leather inside a sports car. Red is if you have like an Overland Summit, or white is for an Overland Summit. I don't like the red leather. My bottom line is this. They didn't do enough to make it look like what it was supposed to look like, and they're trying to sell you this thing based solely on the fact that it has a supercharger and it has a drivetrain that's strong enough for the supercharger. You see this picture right here? This is what the Chrysler 300 SRT should look like. Following the logical progression of dropping off the fog lights, which I don't understand why you would need to do that, but anyway, following the logical progression of dropping off the headlights, adding on the well-known Hellcat wheels, these would be right here, the brass monkeys, and putting a Hellcat hood on the car would naturally produce something that looked exactly like this. That's assuming that the front end design of the current Chrysler 300 was not changed. This is what the Chrysler 300 Hellcat should look like. This is what the Chrysler 300 Hellcat should look like. There are a lot of people who watch my videos. There are some people who say, right on, man, you're absolutely right. And then you get these jerk-offs who want to say, oh, why are you complaining? Why are you complaining, man? You got to start complaining. You're pissing and whining, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, when you have the amount of money moving through your hands that I have, and you're able to make decisions such as buying cars that make no sense whatsoever and are only getting 8 miles per gallon on the road, that is when I will take your advice. Because up until that point, I am in no need to worry about what you think about what I want to buy. The people who I am talking to are specifically the people who plan on buying this level of product. And when I forward this video to FCA, I want FCA to understand that this is what the Chrysler 300 Hellcat should look like. If you're going to play the corporate games and drop the words SRT off of the car, fine by me. I can always add them later. But the bottom line is, if you do that, you're ruining your product. Your product stands for something. Your product stands for street racing technology. Now, I know that's not legally, you're not supposed to say that shit. You're supposed to say it's street and racing technology so that you're not, liable legally when somebody wraps this fucking shit around somebody or a crowd of people or whatever. I understand all that. Street and racing technology. I call it street racing technology because it's SRT. It doesn't say S and RT. That's some bullshit. SRT. Street racing technology. So listen, I understand all that legal mumbo jumbo and you want to get rid of it. Bottom line is this. The product, first of all, you're putting a fucking supercharger into a car that already has 485 horsepower, and we're racing the shit out of these piece of garbage Nissan Maximas and these shitty ass Nissan GTRs, and we're able to beat these bastards in a quarter mile. So my thing is, listen, you got to understand, when we buy stuff like this, we're not buying shit like this to save money. We're not saving Mother Earth. Mother Earth, the oil came out of the earth. We're not saving shit. In fact, the next hurricane that comes along is going to be a superstorm bigger than the one we had this year, and it'll probably wipe out all of like South Central LA before Kim Jong-il does with one of them nuclear weapons, or Kim Jong-un. So my point is this: don't fuck around, please. Build what we want you to build. Stop screwing around. And if it comes down to you having to hire me to be on your design team, as long as you're willing to pay me, you know, we'll talk about that. But as long as you're willing to pay me at least what I'm getting now or more running my own company, I'd be willing to come on to your design team and walk you through this, because there's no need to be making mistakes, especially when the competition has fallen so far behind. BMW and Mercedes ain't making shit like this. They can't afford to. They're making CLAs and they're making 2 Series and stupid shit with little 4-cylinder bullshit engines that are turbocharged the fuck out of them. And now they got this new one. Mercedes got this car where the engine is a 4-cylinder that redlines at like 11,000 RPM. That thing will spin so fucking hard until the people get thrown out of the fucking car. It doesn't make no goddamn sense. My point is this: 707 horsepower. That's fine, but wait a minute. You got the Demon engine. Why aren't you putting that 800 plus horsepower into the Charger, the Jeep SRT, and the Chrysler 300, and the Challenger? We should forget the Demon. The Demon that's a car that's designed to trick you into coming into the dealership. You'll never be able to get a Demon, not unless you already bought one. The most you'll be able to get is a wide body Hellcat Charger or Challenger. So my thing is this: why not make it so the Demon engine can go into the Jeep SRT, and then you can put Demon badges and a Demon hood? Do you see how simple this shit is? Engine plus drivetrain plus hood plus badges. It's not complicated. Bigger brakes, more tires. You're already getting $1,000 out of us for the rotors because you're the only one who makes the rotors. So you're already fucking us there. $1,000 for the rotors and $450 for the pads. You already got us. But listen, I know you got me, but I got my wallet right here and this shit is open. So all you got to do is make what I need you to make, so that when I'm out on the road and cops pull near my car and they're looking and they get scared and they're like, yo, if this motherfucker start driving, there's no way I can catch him. That's what I want. I want them to see this car and say, fuck, I can't race this dude. I'm not even gonna bother trying. That's what I want. I don't want you to make me shit that looks just like everything else, so that when these losers, I saw somebody put Hellcat badges on a Dodge Dart the other day, and it made me want to throw up. I wanted to reach on his car and take his badges off. You're not allowed to do that. But I need you to focus. I need you to focus, because it doesn't make sense for you to be turning out world-class products that have people terrified, because these losers in these Nissan Maximas, these shitty-ass Honda Accords, these FRSs, they're not going to race me. They see that shit. They know what that means. They're not going to race me. But now, the Trackhawk looks just like everything else. So they say, yeah, this fucking slow-ass Jeep, I'm going to race around this asshole. I don't need that. I got these GTIs, these Volkswagen GTI losers trying to race me every time I go outside. I want these people to see the back of that thing and say, you know what, fuck that, I'm not racing this dude, because I already know I lost. And if I race him, I'm probably going to wrap myself around a pole, because he's just going to fly right past me. There's nothing I can do. That's what it is. I need you to build products that inspire fear in other drivers. That's what I need you to focus on. So please make sure you do that. Make sure the 300 Hellcat has the Hellcat hood, Hellcat wheels, Hellcat badges, and I need a different style spoiler, because you made the mistake of putting the spoiler from the SRT on all of the, the S models. I don't like that. I want the people who didn't spend the money on an SRT product to know that they don't have an SRT product. I want you to make it so that there's no way that you can add the SRT stuff onto the older V6 cars, because I'm sick and tired of seeing these people do that shit. That up badging is evil, and it shouldn't exist. And I need you to focus. Last thing I'm gonna say, let's not fuck this up. First of all, you see those 3 buttons right there? Cruise control, automatic, adaptive cruise control. I expect to see that in the Chrysler 300. The Dodge Charger, the Dodge Challenger didn't have it. I don't expect to see any fucking blank buttons. I don't want to see that shit. That's that bullshit from BMW, Mercedes, and Audi, where you don't have all the buttons and shit. I expect to see 3 freaking buttons with stuff on them so that I can use them to do automatic cruise control when I'm in traffic. That's number one. As far as fog lights, you people keep on pissing me off. We don't have fog lights on any of the Hellcats. I expect to see fog lights. I'd like to see fog lights. If you come up with one of those lies about why you don't have fog lights, yeah, I'm going to criticize. Second of all, I expect to see the front sensors. You see this piece of shit Ultima right there? What happens if I get too close to them? I expect to have front... Look at that. You see that? I expect to have front sensors, just so in case I get too close to one of these loser-ass Ultimas that I don't hit him. When I'm parking, I expect to have... What is it called? I expect to have rear sensors in the rear, because I don't want to get close to anybody else. So I expect to have all that. I don't want to see anything less on that car. You see this Ultra View roof? I expect to see that in the Chrysler 300. I expect to see that. Now, I don't know what you're going to put on the chairs, but you see my chairs say SRT. But now y'all are trying to make it so we don't have the words SRT on anything. Like, for instance, in that new Jeep Trackhawk, I don't know how these people expect you to pay $100,000 and the shit don't say SRT on the steering wheel. That right there is ridiculous. See, look at that. You see that? That's muscle right there. See, we want cars that stand out. We don't want these little bullshit Ultimas and stuff. We don't want that. So anyway, I expect to see SRT on my steering wheel. I expect to see something on the seats. If you want to come out with a new name, the Chrysler 300 Demon, whatever you want to call it, please make sure there's some kind of emblem or something on here that justifies the fact that that thing's going to cost like $80,000 or $70,000 or $9,000 or whatever. Just make sure you justify that. And other than that, I really can't think of anything else. But, you know, the Chrysler 300 I showed you had heated and cooled cup holders, so, you know, I'm probably not getting that again. So, you know, I can deal without the heated cool cup holders. I did use them. I used them for cans of soda. Other than that, I really can't think of anything else. So let's just get those main things down. And as far as colors of my brake calipers, I expect them shits to be red. Red screams fast. Yellow does not scream fast. Yellow may scream fast on a red Ferrari, but that's because it's a Ferrari, and that's because it's red. This is not complicated. It's not complicated at all. And... okay, you know, that's basically it. So please, just make sure you get it all right.